I would challenge the sentiment that Americans think bigger. I do believe that Australian founders in particular build with a global mindset, whereas I have found that US founders build for the US.
VCs who haven't been founders themselves don't know how founders should run companies, and C-level execs as a class include some of the most skillful liars in the world.
The goal of the pitch deck is to get a meeting, and then the plan's got to change. Like anything you can do that can push it forward to make the chance increase that they'll give you the meeting. And then once you get the meeting secured, it's a whole different ball game.
Now, given the state of funding markets, I thought this chart was an important one. This is what various body parts are worth on the black market. I think the key thing is there's always options. Good morning, team. How are we?
Awesome.
Hello.
Awesome.
Can you be any... Yeah, that's just for something different.
Every day is awesome. How are you, Don?
Good. Into the Renos. So I'll have to send you a bit of a picture. If I was to die, the tombstone would probably end up saying something like he died doing something that he loved, which was saving a small amount of money on something that somebody else more qualified should have done.
I love your comment this morning, Ash, in the team chat. Like, do we have key person insurance? It's like, I'm not sure they cover it for the shit Don does.
Well, I first got to determine key person. That's the bit that has me worried.
I'm going to Byron. I've got a pitching retreat. Yeah, I'm really excited, a little nervous. Pitching in front of strangers is always a good test to see how polished you are. Yeah, it's going to be good. Lots of good food, I've been told. And beautiful Byron, which I've never been to before. So excited to...
Oh, you've never been to Byron? Oh, you're going to love it.
Yeah, everyone says it's my vibe. And I think that's a compliment, but I'll tell you next week.
I can see us having a Byron office pretty soon.
Yeah. Nimbin's more my vibe. And what about you, Jack?
I don't know where that is.
It's probably best you don't.
Yeah. You float there. Jack.
Nothing new, Don. Just the same old.
You've got your ears again, Jack.
Yeah, I did move it. I moved the plant around so they weren't a perfect bunny ear. But,
yeah, they've gone from being antlers to, I don't know, lopsided hound ears.
And Aaron.
It's just been time with family and work. I just feel it's work. I have nothing new. That sounds really boring.
I do like the fact that we gave Jack some opportunity for brownie points this week when we told him he had to come to the US, but he's going to do the right thing and stay home with his other half and be a good role model. So make sure you dine out on that one too. Oh, when's Anna's birthday?
Today.
Today.
Oh, happy birthday, Anna.
Yeah.
Can we get her on?
Yeah, dial her in. But yeah, it was lucky. I just caught the florist last night. Ash and I were leaving the office, and I was like, shit, it's 5 o'clock, and then ran straight to the florist and had it in time.
Oh, Jack, you're a modern man. Well done.
Jack, have you arranged
and he's like, I don't know where it is.
Have you arranged a dinner for her tonight where like 6 of your mates randomly show up unannounced?
Nah, so not this time. That's reserved for Valentine's.
Let's get in. I think, again, this year, we were the only people not at South by Southwest. And the reason why we didn't go, partly, is for an emerging manager. We have to keep our powder dry. And a lot of the reports out of last year's South by Southwest, that was rubbish. And all the speakers were corporates that didn't know their ass from their elbow. This year, however, it sounds like they've taken that feedback on. And by all accounts, it was a great event that we missed.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good. Although there wasn't as much on socials about it as I expected. Definitely one for the radar. The other thing on this makes me think of is whether we adjust our London mission to actually hit South by Southwest in the UK, because that's going to be on in June next year. And it clashed with London Tech Week, but they've now separated the dates out. So maybe we just trump everyone.
We could just go to Austin and really trump everyone.
Well, yeah, there is that too.
So is South by Southwest later in the calendar or earlier in June?
A week earlier. Have you got something on, Don? Oh, I think I know where you're going. He wants another medal.
Well, the reason why I didn't sign up to Cairns Ironman was because of the London mission. But if we go a few weeks early...
Look, I like the logic. Okay.
Okay, let's talk about it after.
Yeah.
We'll take it offline.
Let's take it offline.
Put a pin in it.
Yeah, let's circle. You guys have actually read the show notes today, I see. So let's not ruin it, but we'll circle back to all of that. Look, there was a lot of sessions. One of the sessions was a panel session that was just talking about some of the biggest frustrations founders have in Australia, and they broke it down into our reporting climate and our need to report more on private companies where Silicon Valley companies don't have to report as much. Another one was around the complexity of stock options and the way our tax treatment works. And then another one was the sophisticated investor rules that severely limited the number of people that could invest in early stage businesses. My general vibe was if those are the only 3 complaints in the Australian ecosystem, that's probably not too bad. But what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I had a similar reaction. Like, yes, these things are true, but I don't want to say so what, but yeah, I think overall we have to also think about things like the R&D tax credit system in Australia, which is quite advantageous. The ability to hire technical talent that actually stays with you for more than 6 weeks, unlike Silicon Valley, the quality of talent that we have. And like in the UK, all companies submit their financial statements. You can actually search competitors. So we can criticize the Australian market the way it is, but in different markets, there's all sorts of frustrations. But yeah, nothing in here seemed particularly new.
Aaron, I guess the other thing that has been more in my ecosystem lately is also on the corporate innovation side, where it is causing a number of like large corporates to not have the economic feasibility to go ahead with innovation because of additional regulation and reporting. So it's actually just pushing what would be your break-even point to a point where they actually can't even go after these ideas and be a part of that innovation. So they're having to just trust that there's going to be startups in the ecosystem who are doing it, which is great on one hand, but it would also be amazing to see some of our largest, most influential companies in Australia getting after some of these tech ideas or new energy sources that they have, and they have the domain expertise to get after. So I do think that the regulation plays a part, particularly in just making us slower and making projects more expensive than they need to be.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ash. And I think you also made me think of what we're not doing. Like when I think of the UK, like some of their government programs and other things, they're just so good at hoovering up the world's tech talent and supporting startups to do business in the UK. And that's probably one thing I think where we're really behind other countries is being why are we not the world leaders in ag tech? Why are we not attracting the best talent here? But yeah, it's a good point about how regulation holds back innovation.
Yeah, particularly in the renewable space. If you think about the vast competitive advantage we have in whether it be natural resources or renewable energy, to think that we're not world leading, to your point, Aaron, it's upsetting and disturbing. And I think we need to think about how we can shift and change that.
Just on the regulation point, the analogy I was thinking is at home where with this bloody renovation, I've got this engineer that has to do all the engineering. Now, the house here was built in 1930, was moved out here in the 50s. It has a 100 mil bearer and a 100 mil joist made out of hardwood. The engineer's specification now for the new bit, and it hasn't moved in 60 or 70 years, it's fine. The engineer's specification is I've got a 300 mil bearer times 2, so they're stuck together, and then I've got a 150 mil joist. Like, what was wrong with the way my house was built. And now we've got all this additional cost, and all it does is slow things down and make everything more expensive. So I just wonder what regulation like that is occurring. Now, the engineer would cite a whole lot of examples and I would ignore all of them, but it's that constant tension of improvement over time. But then I also look at the complaints that occur with, say, reporting. Like when you actually look at a financial report of a company, I don't think there's a huge amount of informational value. What a lot of founders are often concerned about is the embarrassment factor of either the losses or the lack of revenue or whatever it might be. When you actually boil down some of the complaints, I'm embarrassed by what's being put up. Not always. There are some highly successful ones that just want the privacy aspect, but I'm just not sure what we lose. If anybody has a differing view that's listening out there that thinks I'm being too harsh on that, I'd be interested to understand. Now, in that same panel, they talked about expanding into the US. And one of the panel said, we both speak English, but that's where the similarities end. And I thought that was quite good. Americans move much faster. They build relationships a lot quicker. They think a lot bigger. They share a lot more. They talk about their wins. In Australia, we've got the tall poppy syndrome. If you talk too much positively about yourself and your success, you're deemed to be up yourself. In the US, if you don't do that, you're not a high enough achiever.
Ash, have you found that checks out since coming back to Oz?
Yeah, a lot of it checks out, particularly not talking about your wins. I think I was trained to talk about my wins because I did find it uncomfortable coming from here. And I was one of the people who spoke about it least. And here I'm definitely someone who speaks about it the most. And so just seeing that cultural shift and change and being cognizant of it. But I think we need to celebrate the wins. We need to share those moments, just like we share the downs. Like if we're not sharing our ups and downs, then we're not being transparent and we're not being authentic. And I think being authentic is something that Australians thrive on in the market, and it's why people love doing business with Australians. So we shouldn't hide when we're doing well. I would challenge the sentiment on that Americans think bigger. I do believe that Australian founders in particular build with a global mindset, whereas I have found that US founders build for the US. So I would challenge that sentiment, but the speed of building and just pace in business, it's far, far faster. If I didn't respond to an email within 24 hours, I was slacking. And it's more just I think the constant events make networking easier to a point, but it's also just the culture of you will reach out to anyone and have a coffee, and you're expected to do that both sides. So I think it's partly culture of just networking is what you should be doing and it's part of your job, but also there's more events, there's more people to network with. So there's just also a size difference as well.
There's so much in that, Ash. And this is a lot of what we're helping the companies with that are coming on our US mission next week. And that need for them to be credentialing, like to be dropping the little references. And Addy Pinkster, an investor in the UK, says to the Aussies, don't be the L-bag, the laid-back Aussie guy. Like you've got to be credentialing. And in the UK and US, if you're not sending those signals, they assume you have none. And so they dismiss you. And so you need to name drop, you need to talk about the logos you've got. And it's so counter the way the Aussie culture is.
It's the new ABC. Always be credentialing.
I like it. Oh, I got to adopt that. It was interesting. The other thing on this US, like yesterday, Wayne Gerard organised a bit of an investor event talking about alternative capital pathways and where are the gaps in the ecosystem. And one of the investors made a comment that he's sick of seeing Australian companies going global and this emphasis on going global, because in his mind, we're losing all this talent and IP and everything else to the US. He quickly received a lot of feedback about how small the Australian market is and what are we actually trying to build here. But I think, as to your point around the cultural differences, maybe we've got the same ambition, but I don't think we're as hungry. Like we've got quite a good standard of living here, and I don't know. I don't feel the same hunger in a lot of founders compared to just what you hit every day, say in the Valley. But I'm curious, like, have you come across that as well?
Yeah, I think I've had an adjustment where I also woke up when I came back and I was like, oh, like working 80 to 100 hours isn't normal, right? Because that was my career. Like that was my entire start to my career was that was the norm. That was the expectation. Everyone in my ecosystem was pulling those hours. And if they weren't pulling those hours in their day job, they had 2 or 3 side hustles going, all right, something's going to get off the ground. Sunday was more of the relaxing day, but you'd still have 2 or 3 coffee networking sessions on the weekend. You're always trying to find a way to build your network, try to get ahead. And the other thing which Jack and I talked about the other day is the mingling of professional and personal in the US is a lot more. So I find the Australian culture is like work is work, and then you have your personal life on the side, and you don't mix those very much. Whereas if your contacts at work don't somehow become also personal, you're going to miss a deal. You're going to miss that head start on someone else who is doing that mingling on a Friday night, on a Saturday, whatever it may be. There is that constant urgency to be the person in the loop who has the highest amount of leverage to call that friend, make that intro. And so I think that's also a big difference. Whereas I mix my personal and professional groups a lot here, and people do find that like, oh, like you hang out with people you work with a lot. I'm like, yeah, that's normal to me.
Is there supposed to be a separate personal life?
I first got to find some friends.
Hey, we love you.
Yeah, and that's what worries me. That's why I'm so sad. Well, that is a bit of a segue to the next conversation. You can't be online without having seen a lot of this founder mode. I'm not sure you can build the early stage of a business with too much work-life balance. You inevitably have to try and squeeze life in around the other bits, which I think, we all do. And at different times you have to push, and different times you have to push back. But Paul Graham, who's like one of the gods of YC, published an article, a blog. One of the things I like about it is the blog itself is like from 1983.
How good is it?
Oh, yeah.
I know.
It's like writing ASCII plain text.
Yeah.
Like he's even got a section here called spam, but it does highlight the quality of the content speaks for itself, because Paul's got millions of followers because he's very good at what he does. I'm just going to read a few excerpts from it. I would recommend people read the whole article, but what he said was at our YC event last week, Brian Chesky, so he's Airbnb, gave a talk that everyone who was there will remember. The theme of Brian's talk was that the conventional wisdom about how to run a larger company is mistaken. As Airbnb grew, well-meaning people advised him that he had to run the company in a certain way for it to scale. Their advice could be summarized as hire good people, give them the room to do their jobs. He followed this advice and the results were disastrous. So he had to figure out a better way on his own, which he partly did by studying how Steve Jobs ran Apple. So far, it seems to be working. Airbnb's free cash flow margin is now amongst the best in Silicon Valley. The audience at this event included a lot of some of the most successful founders we funded, and one after another, they all said the same thing had happened to them. They'd been given the same advice about how to run their companies as they grew, but instead of helping their companies, it damaged them. Why was everyone telling these founders the wrong thing? That was the big mystery. And after mulling it over for a bit, I figured out the answer. What they were being told was how to run a company you hadn't founded, how to run a company if you're merely a professional manager. But this MO is so much less effective that founders feel it's broken. There are things that founders can do that managers can't, and not doing them feels wrong to founders because it is. In effect, there are 2 ways of running a company, founder mode and manager mode. Till now, most people in Silicon Valley have implicitly assumed that scaling a startup meant to switching to manager mode. But we can infer the existence of another mode from the dismay of founders who've also tried it and the success of their attempts to escape from it. There are no books specifically about founder mode that I know of. Business schools don't know it exists. All they have so far are the experiments of individual founders who have been figuring it out for themselves. But what we now know we are looking for, we can search for it. I hope in a few years, founder mode will be as understood as manager mode. We can already guess some of the ways that it will differ. The way managers are taught to run companies seem to be like modular design in the sense that you treat subtrees of the organizational chart as black boxes. You tell your reports what to do, and it's up to them to figure it out. But you don't get involved in the detail of what they do. That would be micromanaging, which they're told is bad. Hire good people, give them the room to do their job sounds great when it's described that way. Except in practice, judging from report of founder after founder, what often turns out is hire professional fakers and let them drive the company into the ground. One theme I noticed from Brian's talk when talking to founders afterwards was the idea of being gaslit. Founders feel like they're being gaslit from both sides. People telling them how to run their companies like managers, and by the people working for them telling them the same thing. Usually, when everyone around you disagrees with you, your default assumption should be that you're mistaken. But this is one of the rare exceptions. VCs who haven't been founders themselves don't know how founders should run companies, and C-level execs as a class include some of the most skillful liars in the world. Whatever founder mode consists of, it's pretty clear it's going to break the principle that the CEO should engage with the company only via his or her direct reports. That's what I'd like to unpack.
Like for me, at that line there where he said, it was like he just discovered this tension and friction, being told how to run a company if you're merely a professional manager. Like we see founders getting this advice from people all the time, whether it's mentors or some strategic partner or some investor that means well, but has never been an operator. Like I was just surprised that he's just coming to this now. Like that was my first reaction to it.
I think it's going to be the most misused article on the planet for a long time.
And it already is.
Which we'll get into.
Like the reaction, like the resharing. I was doing a search on LinkedIn this morning for all the posts that mention founder mode, and the random interpretations of what was said. It's like, what? Did you actually read the article, or are you just jumping on the algorithms? Like,
and I think the funny memes that have come out already, the one that you found, Aaron, a board member asked me why I spent $500K on a yacht and a private Diplo show. I looked at them in the eye and said, founder mode. He smiled and invested 5 million more.
You can see founders using this. Like, it's founder mode.
Ash, Jack?
I did like from the perspective of him saying business schools don't know this exists. It did make me pause and think back to what I'd been taught and the different processes that, are taught day in and day out at those schools. But I think there's more than just this operator founder mode. Like there's way more to this. This isn't going to be the answer to everything. I'm with Aaron. To me, I was like, well, of course a founder's not going to operate it like a seasoned professional executive. But I was keen to, there was a little snippet that I pulled out. I wanted to get Don and Aaron your thoughts on, which was usually when everyone around you disagrees with you, your default assumption should be that you're mistaken. But this is the one rare exception. VCs who haven't been founders themselves don't know how founders should run companies, and C-level execs as a class include some of the most skillful liars in the world. Like to me, I wanted to get, as operators, your instant gut reaction to that.
True. Whether it's liars, I think they're unaware. So whether you classify it as liar or not might be a technicality, but
professional managers don't understand that their skills and their experience is situational to that environment that they've either trained in or been brought up in.
Yeah.
And then they come to a different environment and 100% often they fuck it up. To say that they were liars, I think might be a little bit of a stretch. We all both, the word liar for professional exec or founder probably weights more one direction than the other. Yeah. There are people that talk themselves up that don't understand that actually my ability to achieve XYZ result was actually a function of a whole lot of ingredients that don't actually exist in a founder controlled company. Again, I believe to be a good VC, you don't need to have been an operator. As long as you're with a complementary team, somewhere the operational stuff is coming, maybe from some other investors, and that you understand your shortcomings and what you're good at and what you're not. Non-operators giving operational advice is where the fuck up is.
Yeah.
And then what happens is those VCs get thrown on the scrap heap. But to say that you have to have come from a purely operating environment, I think is fundamentally wrong. And if you've only got a purely operational environment, you are coming also with biases. And what I like about this team is we've had operational experience, we've got non-operational experience, and the different perspectives that come from either a data approach or a framework approach or an experiential approach. Like, it's the combination that I think is that's important.
I think that line, the first line of that, Ash, that you highlighted, usually when everyone around you disagrees, your default assumption is that you're mistaken. Like, it's such a good watch out for founders, like of who is giving that advice? Who around you? What is their experience base? Is it like, Don, to your lane of genius and your work around life cycles, right? Like the DZ models, like, are they coming from a place of like stage appropriate advice? And are they just projecting from a data set of one? And this is a trap as well. Like, we see successful founders who've had success in one instance, and they are an operator, they've got operational experience, but then they project that as, here is a solution to all things. And causality is really difficult to understand. And what we think drove our success may not have actually been the true factors that drove it. So I don't know if I helped at all, other than to say it's hard for founders to identify what to listen to.
There's been a couple of times, and I can't remember them specifically, but they sit in my vibe, that, Jack, you don't come from an operator's background, but there's been a couple of conversations over the years where that lack of operational bias, you've then just gone, nah, you just got to do this, this, and this. And if they stop fucking around with that, and if you just, and you were 100% right, and you weren't caught up in all of the excuses and different things that sometimes from an operational, when you had too much operational experience, when you've just felt the pain of trying to implement and all the shit you got to deal with and all the problems, it can be easy to start to either make excuses or victim mentality creeps in. When you haven't had to deal with all that shit, you just look at it more objectively and go, just go do A, then B, then C, and then come back and talk to me. Like, why is it so hard? And you're like, yeah, no, you're actually right. Thank you.
Can I just say there, Don, the only thing I disagree with that statement is you said there's been a couple of conversations over the last few years. I thought you were going to say like every day.
Yeah. I agree with that.
But it's so true, Jack. You come in with first principles thinking, but it's combined with this like constant questioning to understand. And I think as a capability, what you have and embody is such a good skill for founders to adopt, like the ability to ask questions of everyone to get to the source of truth and apply critical thinking to actually come up with a conclusion, rather than, I guess what I'm guilty of, the Rolodex of past experiences. Oh yeah, jump to page 32, here's the answer. And you do it bloody well, Jack.
Yeah, I like thinking about this, like there's so many ways that someone can successfully run their company. Like there isn't the one way. And going back to like first principles and like all models are wrong, some are helpful. Like your role as the founder is take advice, weight it, and then apply it to what works for you. And if you think like an analogy for rugby, if someone told you run this play, but 9 times out of 10 you run it, they steal the ball and they score the try, change the fucking strategy. Like it's so simple. You can't keep running the same thing. But people run, like they take frameworks in business and apply and think that's gospel. They can only run the company the one way, but it's not true. And there's so many different ways you can run it. But if you keep getting smacked in the face, you've got to change.
I think that other thing Jack does well is questions the model. So it's not just, oh, someone tells you to go run XYZ play, Jack, using your analogy. There's a level of why. Why have you chosen that? What in the market is telling you to do that? Okay, well, do you have the team to be able to execute that? There's a whole list of questions that I think some founders get caught up in. Well, I've been told to run X, Y, and Z. I'm going to run it, even if I don't have the right teams, the right teammates on the field. I don't have like the knowledge to actually implement it. And that's okay, but you just have to be vulnerable and ask and go, can you help me understand this more? Why are you thinking this way? okay, well, what type of team do I need to execute that? And then it may or may not work. And I think that's the level of inquisitive nature that Jack has that founders need to take.
Okay. Appreciate all the good stuff.
Yeah, what is this? Can I just remind you that he still captained his team to a loss, just so I can,
Scream that down.
so I can get some balance. No, but it is. I think everything is nuanced, and a lot of people have difficulty with nuance and try and make the world black and white. And founder mode, if we can use that, there's only a certain way of getting companies off the ground. There is a certain energy. There's a certain benevolent dictatorship. There's a certain drive. If the absence of that energy exists, you find failure is the highest outcome. But a bit like the human life cycle, what's normal at one phase becomes abnormal at another. And this idea that we have to flick from founder mode to manager mode, to me, is where the dysfunction lies. What we actually want to be able to do is get the blending of those energies at the right time. Because if you start bringing in management too early, and like with the human life cycle, you give birth to this child. With founders, they give birth to the company. In the early stages, you've got to be fully in control of everything. It can't look after itself. It can't do its own things. But then as the child grows and as the company grows, it then becomes normal and healthy to let them start doing more things by themselves. And that's where it's more of about how do you transition to a world of self-management where the company can get some of those things in place. But this idea of one or the other, I think, is where it's wrong. And if you apply a life cycle model to it, and what we're measuring in the life cycle is not age or revenue or number of people, any of that, it's the relationship between flexibility versus control and predictability. When something is born, an early stage business, it has high flexibility. It can do all sorts of things, but it has very low control, very low predictability. As the company matures, it should develop controls and predictability and systems. And that's where the professional aspect comes in. But it's also going to pare back some of the flexibility. It can't be running all over the place like a toddler trying to do all these things that it's not capable of doing. And so for me, what you don't want is Apple. So Apple got referenced in this. You don't want Apple V1, where the founder, i.e. Jobs with Wozniak, builds this thing but gets out of control, is trying to do too many things. If Jobs had stayed in that founder mode, he would have killed Apple. Like, Jobs then gets ejected from the system and in comes manager mode. Now, Scully is told, or people say that Scully almost killed Apple. Well, no, Scully did all the things that a founder doesn't like to do. Systems, process, controls, structures, all of that stuff that Graham here is railing against. But then when Jobs came back, a lot of that work had been done, and that allowed the business to handle his entrepreneurship. Now, manager mode doesn't mean a strict corporate structure and the founder's then not involved in all sorts of things. No, it's about making sure you're involved in the right things and that accountability can still be held with people within the organizational chart. What is dysfunctional is having an org chart and having a founder going through and giving instruction at every level. That leads to anarchy. Now, some founders are better than others or have more capacity than others, and they can build a company based on telling every layer of the organization what to do more than others. But they top out. They reach a certain scale. What we want is an organization in founder mode that has the systems, processes, and controls, but the founder's still pushing their energy into key areas. It's still having conversations. It's saying, here's a problem. I want to be involved in that discussion. But they're able to hold accountability. But at the same time, you don't want seagull syndrome. And what seagull syndrome is when you get an org structure, you get things in place, and like a seagull, the founder flies in, shits all over the place, gives instruction, and then buggers off again, back on holiday or wherever else, right? That becomes dysfunctional because then the company's on edge. And to me, that's what gets lost in this conversation. And if we bring it back to some of the first principles, now these are a model, but some of them are helpful. There are 4 roles, whether you're in founder mode or manager mode. You've got to produce results that your customers want. You've got to administrate, so there's systems and controls. You've got to entrepreneur, so you've got to bring in new products, new ideas, and you've got to integrate. That's the PAEI framework. You've got to produce, administrate, entrepreneur, and integrate. Now, what are founders really great at? Producing and entrepreneuring. What are they shit at? Administrating and integrating, generally.
Don.
There was a glitch. I heard something there. Yes, there could be some weakness in administrating, like, not paying your rego, so your car ends up with a repossession warrant on it or something like that. But the manager mode almost is like hand off, PAEI. No. You want founders still doing what they do best, which is driving P, driving E. But what you do is you start slicing the organization into the ability to develop systems and controls, hand off the A, bring high A people in, bring some systemic structures to bring the I in. And so to begin with, you're 100% founder in all of those ingredients, accepting that on some of the ingredients like A and I, you're weak. But then as time goes on, you want to decrease the founder's engagement in the A and the I ingredients so you can build that stuff up. And then the other one that I wanted to share at this point is that it's not about founder mode. It's not about manager mode. Ultimately, successful companies make great decisions and implement them fast. And why do we need to make great decisions and implement them fast? Because we've got constant problems and opportunities we need to capitalize on. And where do those problems and opportunities come from? They come from a changing environment. And where does all this change come from? It comes from a world of interdependency. The more we are interdependent on everything from technology and people and all sorts of things, when in any change in any one of those interdependencies ends up creating new problems and opportunities you've got to deal with. Then you've got to make decisions, you've got to implement them. Now, to get a company off the ground, a founder leads the decisions and implementation. To make it sustainable, we need to cascade and institutionalize what the founders does in order to get scale. Because scale just means being able to solve more problems and implement them faster, being able to have more interdependencies. And this is where founders get lost. Now, the model we adopt is this idea of democracyship. It's on the decision side, you're incredibly good at democratically getting the information you need, allowing people to have their say. But on the implementation side, there's dictatorship. It's like the time for talk is over. We've got to go and get this shit done. And it's the blending of the two. Now, really great founders like Brian Chesky innately were born and learned how to use democracy. When you listen to the way they operate, they are able to get different views, different points of view, and they facilitate an environment where the decision is made, but ultimately they are not running, it's not consensus. Someone still has to take the decision and implement it on time and on budget. Now, that's where the managerial class and professional managers often come in. They're hired to come in and do those things, but because we don't have a way of handling the two energies and integrating them properly and getting the best out of them, we end up in this black or white world of it's either founder mode or it's professional mode. And I agree, you hire too many professional managers, even if they're really great, and you delegate without systems, process, and controls, you're not actually delegating, you're abdicating, right? Delegation without systems, process, and controls is abdication, and abdication leads to the company going broke, which is what is described in this article. The right sequence isn't hire great people and give them rope to do whatever they want. The right sequence is have a PAEI approach, break down the company into its component parts, set up the systems, processes, and controls for the items you're going to delegate first in the right sequence, right? A founder should never hand off the P roles and the E roles first. They should be handing off the A type roles. And you do it in sequence. And then what's happening is you're bringing in professional managers that have got strong rails to run on, You're doing it controlled. You're doing it like a salami. And then you overlay, what mode am I in? And founders that get stuck in their businesses is because they're so required to be part of every decision, every bloody implementation. If they're not around, things don't happen. Well, that's dysfunctional. But manager mode by itself is dysfunctional because where's the entrepreneurial energy? Where's the drive? Where's all that stuff only founders can do? So it's not about one or the other. It's blending both. I humbly submit.
Just want to clarify one point on that. So the
double click on whatever you like.
Oh yeah, let's double click. It's one of your favorite terms at the moment. So hiring good people and giving them room to do their jobs. You still need to do that, but it's at the right time once you've got systems and tools, or if you need people to help you build those systems and tools, you hire those people and then you hire the managers. Is that more what you're saying?
Yeah. So it's making a decision that at a certain point, an individual founder or a team of founders can't continue to do what they're doing all in the same way. And so it's making a decision to say, okay, well, we want to transition to an environment where the best outcome is most likely to occur. And that occurs when there are some rails to run on. There's systems, there's processes. We work out which are the roles, which are the functions that we want to do this on first. We build some structures around that, and then we hire someone that will perfectly achieve those bits that we want. What it's not is saying, oh, I'm a bit tired, or the VCs told me I should step aside, or we should go and appoint, and we just appoint the person and we let them figure that out. It's not impossible, but the majority of people that you would hire for those roles have never had to build those structures from ground up. And that's why with us at Tribe, we try and help the founders on that transitionary period. It's like, you will work out whatever it is that you think you need to do, but here's a framework, and I'm going to help you set up the systems, processes, and controls to then bring in those people rather than just letting them go to themselves. And where it's always a big screw up is where the founders try and hand off sales. They try and hand off new product development. They try and hand off like culture and climactic aspects. No, you need to get the foundations of administrative kind of stuff. So it's like not handing off sales, but maybe sales administration. Not handing off marketing, but maybe you need to get some support in there. Not handing over all of human resources, but maybe just the human resources administration whilst you keep the integration and development.
Don, one thing I like about Paul Graham's new essay is it gives us some marketing material to relaunch that structuring workshop that we couldn't articulate the value of to founders, because this stuff is so important and it's not well understood, like the nuances of it. And I think now we can have a title around, I don't know, founder mode versus manager mode and how to navigate it.
Yeah, there's a whole thing.
It's also our competitive advantage, right? So as we go to market with our captive fund, this is something that both investors should be looking for in VCs to be able to understand. And if they are saying that they're going to add value beyond the capital, this is a very good articulation of just one thing that we can do. And also on founders who may be aware, or this opens their eyes to what they may need and help understanding. This is just one thing we can add value. And I think it's a great thing for us to be aware of, talk about, and yeah, get it out there.
Yeah, 100%.
Anything further on that?
I think that was really good, Don.
Yeah, I think you nailed it.
Well, can I also have a medal then?
The Christmas party, you're getting all the medals.
Yeah, not for the right reasons, generally.
Your medal is making it down the bowl.
Ash, our Christmas party's a little bit aggressive, so you're just going to have to strap in and just...
They come with a disclaimer.
Yeah.
Do we have that in the calendar, speaking of administration and organization?
It's coming.
God. Fuck, we're not even in founder mode nor manager mode. We're in some dysfunctional...
Listening, I am the person who's come in on the A side.
You'll have it before the end of the podcast.
Well, someone that gives out really strong founder mode vibes is Harry Stebbings. Listeners of this podcast will know that we love Harry. He's a bit of a shining light in terms of content production, but also he's just raised one of Europe's largest VC funds. Now, from an 18-year-old that started with no experience and just started a podcast talking about VC to now a $400 million fund. Wow.
Yeah, it's just phenomenal. And demonstrates his ability to have built trust with an audience, built credibility, and then like leverage that, convert that social capital into actual capital. Well done, Harry.
Yeah, definitely a blow to the ego. Jack, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And he's still got his hair. Fuck.
Yeah, he didn't have to work with these two buggers for 3 years.
Well, he's turned up, he stayed at it. I think when you look at his questioning, it demonstrates that he actually understands the space. And ultimately, I'd say investors are backing the fact that he should have some of the best lead generation going around because he's got connections to all of the founders that people want to work with.
Yeah, not just understands the space, but it's clear from his episodes just how deeply connected his and the relationships he has across the stack. So, yeah, I want to see him succeed. I love his content. Love what he's doing.
Whether it's founder mode or professional mode, the core issue is the same thing, right? There's this constant flow of decisions and implementation. Now, if you have a series of decisions that don't go your way, and you've got to be careful, like sometimes people will judge a decision by the outcome. And sometimes that's okay. The majority of the time, you should never judge a decision by the outcome. You should judge the decision based on the information available at the time, the reason why you were making the decision, the impulses and all of that. And sometimes the right decision still ended up with the wrong outcome. But somewhere along the line, if a business fails, having raised lots of money, it is probably reasonable to say somewhere along the line, whether it was founder mode or manager mode, some decisions weren't as good as they could have been, and or the implementation may not have been where it needed to be. And this week, another company has gone into administration, which seems to be a bit of a common theme in our ecosystem at the moment. A drone delivery startup backed by major local venture capital funds has been placed into administration after falling out with one of its largest backers, who allegedly pressured the firm to take production shortcuts to generate revenue faster. Swoop Aero, which was backed by CSIRO's Main Sequence Ventures, Folklore Ventures, and Right Click Capital, has appointed BPS Reconstruction and Recovery as administrators 2 years after it turned down a $100 million takeover. Swoop Aero co-founder Eric Peck had decided to step down before administrators were called in. Eric told the Australian Financial Review the administration process was necessary to try and secure its future after it was unable to raise just a few $100,000 to finish production run of its kite drones. We got stuck in a loop where we needed to ramp up manufacturing to ramp up revenue, but we needed capital. And it took us a long time to transition the order book onto a new sales structure that had more of an upfront component. The company was founded in 2017. It raised more than $26 million in external funding. And in an email to shareholders, Mr. Peck said Swoop did not have enough money to support its regulatory, product, and operational needs. So this was sad to see occur.
Yeah, really sad. It's really sad. I always wondered what their actual revenues were like, but a couple of interesting things here for me. It's very much got the vibe of we failed because we couldn't get capital. And then at the end there's a little bit of a blame game. Like there was a line, we haven't got enough diversity within venture capital in Australia to understand safety critical businesses really well. And then
I call bullshit on that.
Yeah. And so, I didn't realize InQtel, which is an intelligence fund out of the US, it's got CIA as one of their LPs invested, which I'm curious why. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, look, it is sad. It seems to be the investors copying the blame here for not continuing to back them. But clearly something wasn't working.
Yeah, if we put it into the context before, life's about problems and opportunities. You're going to make really great decisions and implement them. I don't know enough about the business model, but I just would have thought with $26 million, there would have been a path that could have developed it. And the problem with investors, and we often get the kicking if we don't provide forever top-ups. But at some point, once you've lost trust, you've lost faith, you've lost a view that this is going to be successful, sunk cost fallacy teaches us that actually you're better off putting into the next venture if you just can't see a way out.
Yeah, another little line in there was, when the tech downturn hit, the company felt pressured in late 22 and early 23 to bring its drones to market faster and to book revenue. It's quite a telling line.
Yeah. And look, for founders that built companies and raised a lot of capital in a world where you didn't have to produce results, so in PAEI, the P, right, produce the results. In the COVID era, you could spend all your time on E, R&D, new products, new ideas, all the exciting stuff, flying around to different places. But actually, this world at the moment is rewarding P&A, producing results efficiently. And if they only started to feel the pressure in late 22, late 23, maybe, and again, as listeners will know, the other name for this podcast could be the cheap seats, because we sit here talking about things that we don't have a full picture on. But maybe if that pressure had been applied earlier and they tried to get small bits of production, bits of revenue, like too often what I think we see is people trying to go after too big a grand plan and not getting little wins, little bits of outcomes away to then build trust. And the problem is, if you're not in production and you're not delivering, and then you run out of capital and say, trust me, it's hard. Jack, Ash?
Yeah, nothing to add there, Don. That was good.
And just keeping the theme of people that had raised money and then run out of runway. So with the Aero theme, Disrupt Radio, the Melbourne media startup that launched in 2023 with a focus on entrepreneurship, but it ran out of money to pay its staff within 12 months, is hoping to secure enough funding to return to live broadcasting in November. Now, when I read this, I must admit, this is the most startup paragraph. The fact that they launched in 2023, ran out of money within 12 months, and now it's coming back. And the bit in the article, so this was in Startup Daily by Simon Thompson, it actually kicked off with 4.075 million in capital. In 2023, it posted a $2.4 million loss. In the first 11 months the station was on air, it spent 4.88 million, including 2.9 million on wages at a burn rate of more than 400,000 a month. By July, management were emailing staff to tell them a new round of investment had failed to materialise and salaries were going to be late. Roberts was reportedly on the hunt for around $5 million at the time. In June, it also attempted to raise $1 million at a pre-money of $11.43 million on the virtual crowdfunding platform, but the raise failed to meet minimum thresholds and was closed 2 weeks later with just $24,000 from 14 investors. Like, there's a whole lot of stuff here, but the lessons here for founders,
Founder mode?
Yeah, founder mode. Well, here you go. This was clearly founder mode, was it not?
2.9 million in salaries. Like, how many people are on this payroll?
And if you had a burn rate of $400,000 a month, it must have been that your income was bugger all. And what we find is that hope is not a good risk management strategy. The easiest thing in the world is to build a cost base, to build a cost structure, to hire people. And then the model always shows when the revenue is coming in. The revenue is always late to come in. It always takes forever to come in. And here it just looks like, again, from the cheap seats, decisions were not made fast enough. The problem sounds like, or looks like, revenue wasn't coming in fast enough. A decision should have been made around that and implemented. Then when they went to the market to get capital, clearly they hadn't built enough trust with investors, which at the moment is a bit of a damning indictment, given the stuff they can raise on crowdfunding. The fact that you could only get $24,000 in a crowdfunding raise at the moment, or in this environment, was that in itself is a problem. And now the founder's going back out to try and raise more money, effectively probably saying, trust me, this time it's going to be different. But they've burned through not only their capital in terms of money, but the relationship capital with investors.
Completely agree.
I mean, I had to Google what this was, so.
I was about to ask, had any of you heard of this before? Disrupt Radio? Like, we play in this space.
No.
I had not heard of it.
Also, maybe I'm late to the party, but radio being a thing again, granted, I also don't have a car, so there's no need for radio in the car. It might be like vinyl and comes back. Like maybe I'm just late on this trend cycle, but maybe they're too early. Not sure.
I'm gonna maybe we should rename this podcast Generational Gap or something.
Mind the gap.
That's a good one.
I like it. Look, there are so many lessons there. The entrepreneurial energy obviously was incredibly high. How you can get, well, I know how you can do it because I've done it myself 20 years ago. It's actually very easy to fall into this trap if you're not willing to be honest with yourself, if you're not willing to pivot really quickly, if you're not willing to say, hang on a minute, something in my assumptions is not working out. And you just got to understand the consequences of losing investor support is really hard. Now, those investors, we've been talking about founder mode for this episode, but what about VC mode? Well, there was a post by Michael Jackson, the VC out of the US, because Tim Waltz, the vice presidential candidate, was interviewed and he made the comment, I don't even know what a venture capitalist does most of the time. So Michael has clarified, here you go, Tim, Zoom calls, tech conferences, pop by startup events for free drinks, be part of the VC echo chamber on social media, say no to entrepreneurs 99% of the time, pick out new Patagonia vests, touch base with the ghostwriter, add value in board meetings, pay it forward with a guest lecture to an MBA class, dinner with LPs, occasionally make an investment, lunches with service providers, gets the latest gossip about the ecosystem in a WhatsApp group, reach out to founders you previously ghosted when you hear a big name firm is now talking to them, give some cookie cutter comments to tech journalists, hear pitches from companies you certainly will never invest in, give long maybes instead of quick no's, tell everyone who will listen about how your portfolio will eventually be at least 3x, blame market conditions for having no DPI, plan your next working holiday, the list goes on.
Accurate.
Very accurate.
I don't have a Patagonia vest.
Actually, we don't have tribe vests. We've got...
Yeah. What's going on?
No, we can't afford them.
But I've still got the JP Morgan ones. I can share them around.
Well, let's get into some Sharts.
Are we doing themes of the week?
Ah, shit. Sorry. There you go.
Aaron,
You're a bastard.
Okay.
honestly.
Sorry, team.
All right. So, new segment, themes of the week, themes or issues of the week. So, Aaron, you seem keen to go, so you go.
Well, I had too many to choose from this week. I could go on a bit of a rant about government involvement and intervention in funding, but universities was one for me this week. So I had a good chat with Lee Staines from UQ yesterday, and there's been a few founders reach out this week around issues with extracting their IP out of universities. So there's one in particular, that's actually two that I know in particular, in dispute with one university, where the university is trying to get extra equity and also royalties right as a company is in the middle of their raise with investors. And it's basically killing not just their cap raise, but potentially killing the company. And I think this is a real watch out for founders, and particularly founders that are spinning out, commercializing IP, is get some investors to have a look at those documents, the IP assignment agreements, early, before you're looking to raise capital, indeed before you even sign these documents. Because things like large royalty payments on revenues, not even on profits, for an early stage company is just going to inhibit growth. It's going to create a cash flow management nightmare. Investors looking at that will question why so much revenue is flowing straight out of the company when it should be used to grow the company. But also having a large equity holder as just dead weight on a cap table that's not adding any future value and is diminishing the returns for those that are actively supporting the company. So I think this is a real challenge in Australia. I know Lee is trying to change this, particularly, I'm not flagging UQ in particular. This particular case wasn't UQ, but Lee's trying to do really good work to clean this up. But it's something where the Australian universities are really lagging behind the US in particular, but other universities that they should be treating this as an investment, like go for the long-term upside and have agreements that are aligned with the outcome you want rather than short-termism and trying to get benefits in the short term. And the other element of this is to have a written agreement in place that is clearly now deemed ambiguous because they're in legal dispute, that's a big red flag for investors. They can't rely on this document to know that it is a source of truth if it's that ambiguous. And also, the longer they spend in dispute, it's highlighting there's a tension between a shareholder and management as to the direction forward. So lots of red flags get generated very quickly by this sort of stuff. And so hopefully it gets resolved quickly for these particular founders, because the longer it plays out, just the more likely it is to kill the company.
Ash.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay, I've come up with one. So yesterday, Jack and I had a really good conversation with a potential investor. And one thing that came out of it was, wow, this deal is amazing. But unless I heard it from you two, I would not have given the deal the time or the headspace to be able to review it and consider it for an investment. And I think that's a very telling thing that we need to be conscious of, particularly founders, but also just anyone who is looking to raise capital, is that the hardest thing is actually getting someone to give you 10 minutes, not 2 minutes, but at least 10 minutes to go through the deal, for you to actually break down the deal, for them to go away after that and consider it in more detail, where people are short of time. And even if they have time, they don't have the headspace. And so particularly coming into year-end silly season, it's just something to be really conscious of. And I think that's just a big learning for me, particularly being new in this role, is, right, I know it's going to take me time to build these relationships with investors, and it's capitalizing on those moments when you have them.
Yeah, and just to follow on from that, Ash, I think for any founders listening, the goal of the pitch deck is to get a meeting, and then the plan's got to change. So you just got to do whatever you can, like any touch point, whether it's the cold outreach, by email, and then you've got an attachment, like anything you can do that can push it forward to make the chance increase that they'll give you the meeting. And then once you get the meeting secured, it's a whole different ball game. So just being super conscious that you only get limited time, but you've got to maximize it.
I think that's such a good one. Well, I'm reliving a conversation yesterday with one of the investors in our syndicate, and Squizify is this great business, but they are looking for a no. And as soon as they hit that one thing that for them is a big no, they don't even read the rest. It's like and so for founders, sometimes it is about actually leaving things out of an initial deck, get to a meeting, go through it, build conviction. And then if there are some hairies or whatever else, dealing with that after conviction has been built.
Yeah, because often a lot of that stuff is nuanced. And so on the page, it looks black and white, but in conversation, it's far more nuanced.
And Aaron, what you're saying is like the investor going through just trying to find a no. And to give an example, one that for some people have said no for Squizify is valuation. And that's really what the theme that I've really thought about for this week. And it's like, you've got to look at it independent, like it's got to be an independent assessment. And the way I've come to assessing startups is there's really a 3-point checklist. And the first one you've got to determine is there demand for the product? And the reason for that is like the reason most startups fail is they just sell something people don't want. So once you go through that, the second one is this a quality business? And then you've got to overlay that is this a quality business? Then you've got to assess the quality of the business in relation to the investment opportunity. And that's when you look at valuation. But to determine whether or not this is a quality business has nothing to do with the valuation. So I think that's why you've got to look at it independently and then come back to the third step and have the overall assessment of whether or not you think this is a good investment opportunity.
Yeah, it's a great point, and definitely hit home in our meeting yesterday, Jack. And I think like there is nuance to what Jack's saying in terms of this process makes sense for where we invest in the life cycle of a startup. So you always have to keep in mind, like, where are you investing? For us, it's pre-Series A, Series A, but you may not have that proven demand if you are a seed investor. That's why we've picked this sweet spot. So I think that's just like a little bit of nuance, and you're talking through that with investors who aren't as familiar with Tribe as well. Having that plus the deal of Squizify to be able to walk through, well, here is how we looked at it. Then when you overlay Val, it still makes sense because of X, Y, and Z, and being able to walk that through. Look, it was a really positive meeting and we learned a lot.
Yeah. Adon, what was yours?
Well, this week with a lot of portfolio support conversations, the constant theme that just keeps coming up is an inability for people to process what's normal versus what's abnormal. And it's not just conflicting advice from others, but all of the conversations that I'm having, I end up bringing back to actually the founders either feeling shame around this problem, and some problems you should feel shame around, right? That you're causing and only certain actions going to get out of it. But 99% of things are actually a life cycle thing, and they occur not because you're a bad founder or a bad manager or a bad any of these things. It's because that's just the way life cycles work. And why that's the case, that's beyond me. I don't particularly care. All I know is that it is the case. And so what I've been trying to do a lot in the conversations is once you've released energy around it, to say, look, you're not an idiot, or you're not bad, or this thing is happening because of these reasons. Now, why these reasons exist in the universe, I don't particularly care. Then the whole idea is to free energy. Take whatever negative energy or negative emotion or whatever it might be and say, just point it towards solving the problem. Don't worry about any of the other stuff. And guess what? If you make another wrong decision, the beauty of being able to pivot and change course is that you could change quickly. But if you don't have a framework that helps you understand that and release that energy, you get into trouble. And that's just being a bigger theme. And what I really want to do is just have a bit more content, have a bit more group sessions with the portfolio on tackling certain problems, especially around organizational structure and strategy, because then they would see that how incredibly normal they actually are. And then they could start learning from others, because we've got some of the portfolio that's a little bit ahead. We've got some of the portfolio a little bit behind. And from a scale point of view, how do we get them learning from each other? So that is my theme of the week.
Good ones. The power of group therapy.
Exactly. So let's just get into Sharts then. So NVIDIA in 2024 versus Cisco in 2000. Now, we've talked before as to why the comparison between NVIDIA and Cisco is a little bit erroneous, but just ignore that. NVIDIA is now worth 11.7% of the US GDP. At the peak of the dot-com bubble, right, Cisco was worth 5.5%, so more than 2 times. And for those at home, the Cisco chart from 2000, from like 5 years or 8 years before the crash, is just up and to the right. And then at a certain point, it's down and to the right. Now, where is NVIDIA? It's just up and to the right. Now, can it continue? Absolutely. But for those that love correlations, this one is an interesting one. But it's not all companies that are smashing it. You've actually got to break up the top 10 percentile and the bottom percentile. And this is a chart of the S&P 1500. And you can just see that it makes a difference, that if you're invested in the top 10 percentile, your EBIT growth is hitting the 20%. If you have invested in the bottom 10%, your EBIT growth is like negative 10%. So there is a big difference in portfolio selection in terms of the returns. Now, your average person doesn't have the ability to try and pick the top 10 percentile, and that's why just going with the S&P 500. Now, one of the things that a lot of Bitcoiners don't like is how correlated Bitcoin is to the broader risk environment. But what's interesting is whilst the NASDAQ has picked up and continued up after a little bit of a pullback, Bitcoin hasn't as much. But if you were to then take Bitcoin and look at what the price is historically across all of the years since it was invented, then historically November through to January has actually been a very strong period. And so if you believe that it's going to hold true again, then Bitcoin could potentially end the year a lot stronger, which would then mean and give support to the NASDAQ also hitting stronger. Now, you never confuse causality with correlation, but an interesting chart nonetheless. Now, the market is also at a bit of a tipping point, because this chart is the 10-year yield, which we can see since COVID has jumped up significantly, but also the S&P 500 yield earnings. And you can just see that actually for the first time in 22 years, bonds are actually yielding more than stocks. So it's been a long time since we had that correlation. Now, the last time bonds was yielding more than stocks was the dot-com era. And we know what happened after that.
Can I make a comment? I know they're Sharts and I still don't have my head around this whole just taking it at face value. But I was reading an interesting article this morning which did point out how JP Morgan is betting on a solid run for those top big name stocks with 6.7% growth. And then they're going up against Goldman, who is actually forecasting something very different, where they are thinking partially a 3% growth, but they're also warning that they actually believe that stocks are going to lag behind bonds for the next 10 years. So just really interesting to see those two big name firms somewhat agreeing and disagreeing with your Sharts.
Yeah. And what the beauty of that is, it just highlights nobody's got a fucking clue.
Exactly.
Act accordingly. Now, some people that should have a bit of a clue are the insiders inside companies. And corporate executives in the S&P 500s have the least open market purchases in 13 years. You've got to go back 13 years. So the people inside these tech companies, they don't seem very excited. And what we do know is when they get excited, they tend to know something's coming. And when they're not excited, it's because they themselves are finding it all too expensive relative to what the future holds. And so this chart just shows how that oscillates. And right now it's quite low. Now, if there is something on the horizon, we know that we like to keep an idea on a look on the VIX, which is the volatility index. Historically, the VIX has been reasonably suppressed in the last couple of months of the year. So what we're looking at is what 2024 has been, and we had a bit of a VIX spike in August, but the average VIX result for 1990 to 2023, you can just see that volatility falls off as the year falls off, which sort of makes sense, less activity, all of that kind of jazz. But in order for something to occur, I'd be looking at the VIX. Now, getting into some more serious items, there was an article in the AFR, which was a survey on frequently used corporate jargon. The most used: touch base, get the ball rolling, think outside the box, best practice, reinvent the wheel, on my radar, bottom line, big picture, hit the ground running, in the loop. Now, what's interesting, it says the most used phrase, but then they've got a separate column for the most hated phrases. So it's almost like the most used phrase couldn't be hated, which I actually think, at least in my case, is incorrect. Now, the most hated phrases: ducks in a row, reinvent the wheel, put a pin in it, circle back, blue sky thinking, low-hanging fruit, piggybacking, break down the silo, ping it, think outside the box. No double clicking there.
I hate blue sky thinking. Oh,
That is so good.
Now, ducks in a row being the most hated phase. So this mean my ducks are absolutely not in a row. I don't even know where some of the ducks are, and I'm quite certain one is a pigeon.
this is so good.
I think two are bin chickens.
So, yeah. Now, given the state of funding markets, I thought this chart was an important one. This is what various body parts are worth on the black market. So you can get $19,000 for your corneas, $6,000 for a skeleton, lungs, $272,000, kidney, $138,000, liver, $137,000, blood looks to be $297 a pint. Your skin, $1.24 a square centimeter. That was a little bit low. Bones and ligaments, $4,800. So I think the key thing is there's always options.
And this is USD, right?
Yeah. So you even make money on the exchange.
Hey, as a family of 6, I'm just happy taking the kids when I get a blood donation so they can eat the free food.
My team's photo, my team's call. Now, I'm not attacking anyone particularly on this, but this is, what's this guy's name again? Prince what?
Prince Jack.
Prince William. So Prince William, 30 years ago, with a beautiful head of hair, just gorgeous. And now with a shaved head.
Sorry, not sorry, Joe.
Because if we could get the investment deck to please be updated with a picture of Jack that's not looking like an 8-year-old, I think that might help our chances.
Oh, that is pre and post VC life.
So something a bit more functional. Feeling overwhelmed by your to-do list. So this is a person with a big dark cloud. Take your biggest task, break it down into smaller tasks, that are more ignorable.
I feel like this is Don energy.
Rude. And to end it, I just want to tell you people, you're doing the best that you can, which is pretty fucking sad.
Jesus. Oh, wow.
What an episode. Whew.
Yeah.
All right, what are we looking forward to?
Can't remember anymore.
Well, I'm going to be pitching Tribe Captive Fun all weekend. So that's
Right.
going to be
That is awesome.
experiment.
That is awesome. I've got an afternoon office hours in the precinct with founders. And then for what I'm looking forward to is getting on a plane, head to the US on Friday. 2 more sleeps, as my kids remind me.
Is that Friday?
Friday.
The best part is Don's not even kidding. Like,
Libby, Libby, change the plan for next week? No, all good. I'm excited. The thing that I'm not excited by, we had a discussion earlier in the week, and I was trying to gauge that if I put in for a points upgrade and got the upgrade, would that mean that I'm not a team player and just a general shit bloke?
Yes.
You will be pleased to know that the fares that we bought were so cheap that they're not even eligible for points upgrades.
I did look it up last night. When I said the other day I'm trying to reserve my points for trips to Cairns with kids, I thought, nah, screw it. I'll just have a quick look. It's like, no, can't do it anyway.
Just get a good neck pillow, put your eye mask on.
It's not the neck that's the problem. It's the lower back. You just don't understand what it's like to be an aging male. And it's...
I know.
Is this like man flu version of flying?
Man flu is real.
Kruger.
This is purely psychological.
What are you excited for, Jack?
I'm actually on away to a winery, spending a night. They've got like a Airbnb cabin, so taking it into there for the night.
Awesome.
To be young again.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. Well, we're going to hang on here. We're going to exit here, and we're going to talk about our fun deck. So we'll say goodbye to all of our listeners. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.
See yas.